Khorne, the Blood God, is one of the most hypocritical characters in all of Warhammer 40K, including the Emperor. Now, we all know the first among the Chaos Gods is a bit of a one-dimensional dude, but he does have more to him than is readily apparent on the surface. Still, the different aspects of the Blood God could not be any more at odds with each other, making him, in the eyes of many Warhammer fans, a bit of a contradiction, an oxymoron. We'll look at why the Blood God is awesome, because even though he's definitely a massive hypocrite, he's so totally badass, and his ultimate truth is so brutal that it doesn't matter. So what do we know about this most brutal and straightforward warp god of the ruinous powers of chaos? He showed up in history during a time which is quite recent to us, but ancient history to those of the 41st millennium, the Middle Ages. Khorne was birthed as a result of human suffering and murder, of conflict on a massive scale. Khorne was made from the collective consciousness of mankind and the rivers of blood we'd spilled. If I had to nail down a moment that Khorne came to be, I might say that it was either during the Crusades or the Mongol invasions of the Kievan Rus and the Byzantine Empire. But there are those among the Inquisition who believe Khorne came into being when the first proto-human bashed another of its kind's head in with a rock. Khorne may have been with us all along. No matter his true origin, the god of slaughter was born, and to this day, he is still the strongest of the big four gods of chaos. I'm not one of those who think Tzeentch is secretly the strongest and most powerful. If Tzeentch wasn't plotting against himself all the time, then maybe, but I do think Khorne would take him in a fight. Khorne has many domains, though, and at various times throughout the history of Warhammer, certain traits associated with the god have been emphasized more than others. Now, we have heedless slaughter, unbound fury, senseless destruction, wanton murder. These are what I have noticed in the books I've read recently where Khorne's followers show up. From Avenging Sun, when the Inquisition and his warband are chased down by a World Eater Space Marine, to Shroud of Night, when Khorne the Betrayer literally stalks an Alpha Legion warband for most of the book like Jason Voorhees. What we see completely emphasized is the brutality, the carelessness for injury, the lack of tactics and care only for killing and or dying. For Khorne cares not from where the blood flows, only that it flows. And while I want to say that there is more to Khorne, and there is, that also feels weird to say because, as I laid out at the beginning, it is these other aspects of the blood god that make him a huge hypocrite. Khorne isn't just the god of war and murder, he's the god of honor, of courage, of martial prowess. Khorne is the god who appreciates murder. Sure, it powers him, but he really appreciates a good fight, and someone who's courageous, and someone who fights with honor. Khorne would rather his champions face you in battle in a challenge, one-on-one, face-to-face, like he used to be able to do in Warhammer Fantasy Battles with issuing challenges from character to character. Stabbing in the back is cowardly, and a true follower of the Blood God should know that it would please Khorne more to lose your own head in battle fighting with honor than to achieve victory through cowardice. And this sense of honor is where Khorne is different than the other gods. Khorne will not lie to you, but nowadays he's just written as nothing but burning fury and rage. Anger personified, anger deified. So he supposedly hates ranged attacks and only appreciates melee, yet has many missile units among his demons and followers. But the first thing to me that makes Khorne a huge hypocrite is that he doesn't really care. Sure, he's the guy who appreciates the honorable challenge and kill, but he also appreciates heedless slaughter, and there's nothing honorable in that. And so, like any cult, there is a deeper layer, a deeper truth. Khorne doesn't care. Those truly initiated deeply into the cult of the Blood God know this truth. One can claim these other aspects of Khorne and emphasize them. They can even be the only avenue that someone worships the Blood God through. But nothing feeds Khorne, nothing at all, like killing and dying. Ultimately, the deepest truth a follower of the Lord of Skulls can know is, again, Khorne cares not from where the blood flows, only that it does. And we see his hypocrisy in how he's supposedly 100% opposed to sorcery of any sort. Magic is absolutely illegal to Khorne's followers, never to be used, totally verboten, except for using warp gates, binding demons, summoning demons, doing blood rituals, sacrificing to Khorne for blessings, demonic possession, warp fire. The list goes on and on. Khorne uses magic and sorcery as much as anyone else. He just tries to act like it's all some kind of biology-based blood connection to the warp, but it's literally just him trying to obfuscate. It's blood magic, not biology, not technology, just warp-born, demon-based, hate and anger-infused blood magic. And his entire persona, his entire set of powers, and his hold over his armies of demons and mortals is completely dependent on this blood magic. Bloodlance, I mean, come on, tell me that isn't magic. So we have a guy who is a god of martial prowess, and yet his demons, and most of his mortal followers too, just run at the enemy with no regard for safety and engage in melee combat if they make it. That is oxymoronic. It isn't good strategy. So one aspect of Khorne is stepping on another. His anger is stepping all over his tactics. His rage is blundering up his strategy. The guy can't make his mind up. So in the end, this reduces him to an oxymoronic caricature of what he should be, of what he could be. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, his followers scream. But there are also those among them that scream maim, kill, burn, which is just going to feed Slaanesh ultimately. Khorne is all about the clean kill, the quick, proficient dispatching of foes in glorious melee combat, the one-blow head chop, the flowing of blood. So why are his biggest followers going around screaming maim, kill, burn? It goes against everything Khorne really stands for. So ultimately, Khorne may prefer the clean kill, the super badass head chop, the best of martial prowess, but he's basically been reduced to a guy who takes what he can get. Anger and rage personify him now more than anything else, and unbridled fury is not going to win you any fights. I know every time I've been in a fight, the thing I was telling myself was to remain calm, to let my opponent get worked up and angry, because that's where mistakes are made. Khorne just doesn't care. People rag on Tzeentch all the time for not caring about his followers, but Khorne would rather see his followers die and bleed out so he could claim their skulls. Well, at least most of them. But he's the kind of chaos god who likes to pay special attention to the rare gems in his collection, and keeps them polished. Khorne, Angron, the World Eaters in general, I'd assume, they're all so proficient at delivering death in close combat that they're effectively 100% immortal at this point. Khorne will resurrect these champions, and they will heap more skulls at his feet, piling ever more offerings up before the blood god. Now I have called Khorne a hypocrite, and been critical of him so far, but Khorne is my favorite chaos god, not considering followers, legions who fell to them, or any champions or anything else. Not even demons. Khorne is my favorite of the gods. But when his demons started using ranged attacks, I knew that Games Workshop was throwing him under the bus. They were leaning into the hypocrite aspect, seemingly self-aware that they'd written a god who opposes sorcery on every level, yet is dependent on blood magic and rituals to get anything done at all. I mean, what is this? I remember seeing World Eaters armies and White Dwarfs since the 90s that had no ranged weapons at all other than pistols. Maybe a heavy bolter on a Chaos Dreadnought, aka Hellbrute, and possibly if they had a Land Raider, then its guns would be like the heaviest range attacks in the entire army. I remember my favorite World Eaters army ever had a heavy bolter on a Dreadnought, and that was the only non-pistol ranged weapon in the army. It was glorious. But now we can go on Warhammer.com and buy a Demon Flame artillery weapon. But it shoots pure hatred, so that's okay, I guess. A Khorne Demon artillery piece is probably the most hypocritical thing in the entire setting. But then doesn't it come back to Khorne not caring from whence the blood flows? So, why aren't the World Eaters just bringing artillery and nukes to every fight? It seems like Khorne is a god trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's strongest because any murder, any death, any war at all, any hatred, any rage, it all powers him. If the Thousand Sons murder you in the name of Tzeentch, it powers Khorne too as god of murder. So what it comes down to is this. Khorne gets followers through promising idealistic things, perfect martial prowess and proficiency in battle. pure honor and courage. All these things that seem to those who fall to his worship to be boons. Imagine being fearless in battle, even in the grimdark future. Imagine being honorable to a fault and perfect in the taking of heads in single combat. But that's all just the glitz and glamour that get you in the door. Once inside, you're in Khorne's blood house of horrors, and you can die for him, and you can kill for him. Ultimately, the blood god does not care. Your blood, your enemy's blood, it doesn't matter. Rage, hate, aggression, heedless slaughter, that's what you really have to look forward to if you're going to take the gifts of Khorne in exchange for your soul. He seems much darker than he does in the fantasy setting, even in Age of Sigmar, and the best you can hope for is to rise to the ranks of his greatest champions, those fated to kill and die endlessly for the Lord of Skulls for all eternity. Constant slaughter and death, appearing through blood magic warp gates that tear through reality in a spray of gory rain. It rains blood and you appear, rearing to slaughter for your patron. You succeed and reappear on another world through the blood mist, perhaps not even knowing what world you're on, only that there are those that need to be murdered for the blood god. You will be a dog on a leash and nothing more, ever. You might be under the impression that you were let off the leash, but that's an illusion. Perhaps it is Khorne's greatest sorcery of all, this illusion. For any free will you once had is subservient to the need of Khorne. Is this Chaos God simply a junkie for blood and skulls? Or is there really more to him? And if so, does that make him hypocritical? The Eightbound, the Slaughterbound, and the possession of Chaos Lords and heroes by greater demons of Khorne, bloodthirsters, are all evidence that Khorne is as deep in the sorcery swamp as Nurgle or Slaanesh. My question for the Blood God, should I ever have the honor of visiting his realm and standing before his skull throne, is how is demonic possession not sorcery, and how is it that warp fire isn't a forbidden ranged attack when your demons use it, and how is it that Khorne can reappear through a warp gate of blood spray that isn't sorcery either? Huh, Khorne? Huh? Why? I don't expect it would go well. But let's not forget that the same awful energies of murder and warfare brought forth a war god for the Eldari as well, Caleb Cain, and Cain wasn't exactly a hypocrite like Khorne is. So does that say something about humans? Khorne, love him or hate him, it fuels him. Kill for him or die for him, it fuels him. Sounds like Khorne has a hustle figured out and he's milking it. No wonder he's the strongest of the Chaos Gods. He wins no matter what.